The Queen's Gambit is the most famous opening in the entire history of chess, and it's no coincidence you've seen it shine in legendary championships in the hands of grandmasters and become a global icon thanks to the series The Queen's Gambit. It seems simple, but it hides much more value than you might imagine. If you've ever wondered how to turn a small concession into a major initiative, this is your starting point. A gambit in chess is an opening sacrifice, usually of a pawn, by which the side playing it seeks some compensation, attack, initiative, developmental advantage, or generally superior activity. In this video, we will see what the Queen's Gambit consists of and explain the basics, the essentials of this opening. To start, it's important to know that controlling the central squares is very important. The Queen's Gambit is closely related to this control of the center. It's also necessary to do other things in the opening. Develop knights and bishops as early as possible, castle to keep the king safe, and maintain good coordination between the pieces. But dominance of those central squares is absolutely fundamental. The ideal would be to reach those two central squares with two pawns, the queen's pawn and the king's pawn, so we control a large number of the opponent's squares and limit their development. In football, control of the midfield is essential. In chess, something similar happens. Whoever controls the center usually has more attacking possibilities. That's why the game usually starts by moving the king's pawn or queen's pawn two squares. In the Queen's Gambit, the queen's pawn is moved first, d4. And of course, by playing d4 on the first move, we aim to follow up with e4 if the opponent does not prevent it. Before c4, the two most common moves for black are those that aim to stop white from placing another pawn in the center. One is d5, which we will cover in this video. The other is knight f6, which leads to Indian defenses. Knight f6 is a developing move. Black develops a knight, controls important squares, and of course prevents white from playing e4 unchallenged. But as I said, d5 is the move that interests us now. And here the move proposed by the Queen's Gambit is c4. It's clear that with d5, black has prevented us from moving another pawn to the center. With c4, we are sacrificing a pawn, since black can capture it immediately. It's not entirely clear, and we will discuss it now, whether white will recover it. But the first question is, what is the essence of the Queen's Gambit? Why is white willing to give up a pawn? The key is controlling the center. Once black captures this pawn, white gains more central presence. The enemy pawn that controlled the important c4 square disappears, and white gains space and influence. Additionally, open lines for pieces are created. Now let's see what white can do if black accepts the gambit. If black accepts, there is a very simple and immediate way to regain the pawn. Queen to a 4 check. We could play queen a 4 check and recover the pawn almost without thinking. The problem is that bringing out the queen early is generally not good. She is exposed to attacks from enemy pieces. The opponent develops their pieces, gaining time on the queen, and while they improve their position, we are forced to move the queen again and again. This is important in chess. In the opening, it's not good to move the same piece twice unnecessarily. Therefore, even though queen a 4 check quickly regains the pawn, it's not a very recommended move. So what are the main moves in this position? Well, here white could play e4, obtaining an impressive pawn center and controlling the central squares we mentioned earlier. It's a sound, interesting, and highly recommended option. However, when we play e4, black may quickly pressure this center, sometimes with a central break, like c5 or e5, or through maneuvers targeting the e4 pawn. Everything has pros and cons. Knight developments, knight f3 or knight c3, are also natural moves that develop pieces without taking risks. Even if they don't immediately recover the pawn or directly occupy the center, they are healthy and useful moves. But one of the moves that is most successful, especially for beginner or intermediate players, is e3. Even though we don't control as many central squares as with e4, e3 allows quick recovery of the c4 pawn with a developing move. Bishop takes c4. Moreover, by playing e3, the d4 pawn is well protected, so any black pressure on that square won't be too dangerous. Now, what happens if black tries to defend their c4 pawn so we don't recover it? This is where one of the most famous traps in this opening appears. A trap is a tactical trick that allows you to win material quickly. If black plays b5, a move that seems very logical to defend the pawn, white has the response of 4. We play against the pawn that has come out to defend c4. If black captures on a 4, those two advanced pawns will be very exposed and fall easily. The natural move for black would be to defend that pawn with another pawn, a 5, but that's not possible because the a file would open and the a8 rook would be undefended. Therefore, after a 4, and here comes the trick, ce6 is quite common. But here, after a takes b5, c takes b5, white wins material with queen f3, attacking the a8 rook, which cannot move. The lesser evil for black is to put a piece in the middle to play knight c6, but they will lose. To avoid losing a more valuable rook, they lose a less valuable knight. Still, they lose material. Queen takes c6, bishop d7, and queen a6, for example. White has a strong advantage. This is what can happen if black accepts the gambit. But often, black does not accept it and maintains the d5 pawn. Most often, black defends it with a pawn, either e6 or c6. These are the most solid defenses. If black plays knight f6, which seems natural, white can capture on d5. If black tries to recover with the queen, what we mentioned earlier happens. Bringing the queen out early is bad because we'll attack it with our pieces. We play knight c3, attack the queen, and wherever it goes, we occupy the center with e4. This way, we achieve a great success, a strong pawn center. If black recaptures with the knight, we also have natural moves that attack that knight and allow us to consolidate a strong center. That's why knight f6 is generally not the best choice. The best move is usually c6, which leads to the Slav defense. It is a solid defense that allows black to defend the d5 pawn with another pawn without blocking their light-squared bishop. If you don't want to complicate things too much, I recommend the exchange variation c takes d5, c takes d5, then develop knight f6, bishop f4, other knight c6, pawn e3, bishop d3, and castle early, which is important and not bad at all. If white plays c4, e6, another reasonable move, you can play knight c3, and even if black may capture quickly on c4, they usually don't. White can play e4 very fast and gain a huge center. You can also play the immediate exchange variation and then develop the pieces similarly to what was mentioned before. Even though there is now a pawn on e6, if black's knight goes to f6, bishop g5 is a good option to pin that knight. And this is a brief summary, an introduction to the most basic and important ideas of the Queen's Gambit. If you want to learn and improve at chess, you can do so at BlackChess Academy, the best chess training program.